How much of this pipeline actually goes through residential areas?
Well, again, it's hard to know. Kennedy has actually produced a map. He had to spend his constituency office money to do it because Kinder Morgan wouldn't share their maps with the community.
Well, I also heard they're going to double the size of those tanks that are holding the oil up there.
Yes.
I mean, what's that going to do for property values around this area?
That's a good question. We're working on a report with the Wilderness Committee on the impacts of a spill on property values. And it's not complete yet, but I can give you a little hint. We found that in Kalamazoo, properties that weren't affected at all by the spill there dropped by 10%.
Yeah.
And that's just because the kind of cachet of property in Kalamazoo has gone down.
Okay, one more thing, and I'll let other people. I heard also, and I don't know if this is true, when they come in to the harbor, the tankers, they have to take on water to bring the tankers in from places like China, and that would introduce different sea life and plant life into our harbor that might threaten our own species. Is that true?
It's quite possible. With shipping in general, that's a problem. I know, for instance, in the Great Lakes, the zebra mussel, which is a terrible invasive species which has really choked the Great Lakes, was brought in by Russian freight ships. And certainly they have that passage under the Second Narrows Rail Bridge is a very dangerous passage. There's about 1.5 meters between the bottom of the boat and the sea bottom there, and only a little bit more between the columns on the sides. And that's what the current vessels. To bring in larger ships, they're going to have to dredge and stir up a bunch of toxins, and they will probably be coming to the federal government looking for taxpayer money to replace the rail bridge so they can fit larger ships into that.
I live on Capitol Hill, and we walk past these markers all along Pandora Street and a few streets up there. So I guess it must come across that area.
There's
another point is that before you're talking about the states producing clean energy. Last year, or early this year, we drove across the northern states, and I was amazed at the number of wind farms going past, huge wind farms. Third point is, because I went to a forum on Monday, I think it was downtown, I was interested, and I happened to look up the Kalamazoo, information on the Kalamazoo spill, and my concern turned to horror. I recommend anyone, especially, I know I'm talking to people who are already concerned, but for those who aren't, if they saw that website, it certainly impressed me.
There's a YouTube video, just a short one, 7 minutes. If you Google Kalamazoo tar sands spill, it's really worth watching. You could get a sense of how the people were devastated by it.
Another interesting thing with that was they had a time schedule as to events that they took place, and it was just horrendous. I mean, the mistakes they made, and that was Enbridge, and
yeah.
I guess it doesn't matter what company.
Yeah.
I would say there's no way it's too bad we have one pipeline already. I certainly don't want more.
Similar to what Michael was saying about pipelines, is like usually the first response when there's a sudden drop of pressure in a pipeline, which would indicate a spill, is actually to turn up the volume to try to because they figure there's some sort of
clear a bubble.
Right. So they usually in that process make the spill much worse than it would otherwise be.
They kept doing that a couple of times, I believe. Their warnings went off, and I think the flow was stopped. And they started it, I understand, one occasion and ran it for an hour. The alarms went off again and it was stopped. I'm not sure if that's an automatic process, but after some time they started again for 45 minutes.
And this is the pattern that you see all over the place with oil issues. Like the Horizon disaster that happened a couple of years ago. I mean, there were pieces of the rubber mechanism that was used to help prevent a blow-up coming up in the wastewater that came up, and they just kept turning it off and on and off and on and off and on. The spill that happened in Alberta, was it last year, 2 years ago? They turned it off and on 3 times. Didn't even evacuate villages. You know, pregnant women getting sick and not knowing they're being exposed to toxins. This is the pattern. This is the pattern. It's not a pattern of care. It's not a pattern of responsibility. It's the pattern of, yeah, absolutely.
On what that woman there said earlier, I was concerned as well. I live across the street as well in a condo, and I'm concerned with when the construction, forget about the spill. I mean, that of course is a horrible potential future thing. But when the actual construction happens, how is that gonna affect property values? How are they gonna protect us while they're building it? Because I had a storage locker down by the Fort Mann Bridge, and just before they started to do the construction there, we were told we had to move out. And they started doing some construction, and I couldn't even go to the storage locker to clean my stuff out without getting sick. And that was just like a small little, some kind of little tiny pipeline that had to do with construction. So I can't picture what this would be. Is there any studies that relate to what happens in terms of, you know, the property values and the health of people when they start the construction? How are they gonna protect us?
It's an excellent question, and there's a lot of questions like that haven't been answered yet.
My name is Anna Burke, and I'm just running the community, the organic community garden here behind the Environment Center. And I heard it from somebody that, oh, it wasn't Kinder Morgan's fault, it was somebody else's fault. So far, every single time, you're seeing this blaming game, like whose fault was it? It was yours, it was theirs, who pays how much? In my opinion, it doesn't really matter whose fault was it. It doesn't really count in dollars that how much you're gonna gain or how much you're gonna lose. Because by the end, no matter how much they're gonna pay, penalty, fine, whatever, you can't take the oil out from the soil, you can't take the oil out from the air, you're not gonna get back your property value, no matter how much they're gonna say they will, because other people who wants to move here, they're gonna say, forget it, it's under the pipeline. And maybe 10,000, 15,000 tankers gonna go through the strait, safe, but you just need one tanker. So-called accident, and accident means that nobody planned to do, nobody's fault was it, it's just an accident. But look at the accident in Alaska. After 20 years, they still have a problem. For me, I have a 20 by 20 lot in here. I'm working all year round for 5 cabbage and 2 things. I can buy 10 times more from the farm and maybe better, but this little garden means much more than so many of us in here than how much you guys ever gonna pay. So for me, I don't want to hear the blaming game and who is gonna gain and how much job we gonna have. Trust me, none. Because whatever you're gonna gain, you're gonna lose. So it's like, it's a win-lose situation like every single business in the world. But this one, it's a no-win situation. In here, we just had a pipeline broken. I read it on the internet, maybe I'm wrong, but there was only 15% of the oil was able to recover. 85% still there. And it's gonna be there for my grandson and from my grandson's grandson. And just you need one more of bigger disaster, and maybe not just Canada, but maybe the whole entire region, maybe the whole North America, or even the whole entire world gonna suffer from greed. Because to have more money on yours or yours bracket, it's a greed. We forget the stuff that really means something in life, and you just want more and more. Okay, you need transportation, but tell me, how many of you driving your own car by yourself?
I do, every day to work, because public transport won't get me there.
And you absolutely right. My husband does the same thing, and he said, I'm not gonna take the painting ladders on a bus, and he's absolutely right. However, there is not just sky trains. You can build in Hungary. I'm from Hungary. And okay, it's a communist country, was before. But 50 years ago, we had electric bus running on a street. It's a bus like a bus, drive like a bus. You don't need a line on the floor, you don't need anything, just an electric line over there and a bus riding wherever you wanna go. So if a communist was able to do it 50 years ago, don't tell me that the best country in the world in Canada, 50 years later they won't be able.
They had the same thing in Vancouver 50 years ago.
That's right.
See, then I'm not lying. We still have to, finally what I want to say is, doesn't matter that what we're going to decide, we have to push them as far as we can, not for yourself, but for the future.
But you asked her to be concerned about the tar sands pipeline. I would say that the liquid natural gas is very concerned, and the fracking that is going on to feed that liquid natural gas in northeastern BC is very frightening. But I think tar sands oil is probably worse than liquefied natural gas. However, a lot of that natural gas is going the other way to the tar sands, where it's used in it's called SAGD, where they basically cook the earth enough, or the tar sands bitumen enough that they can pump it to the surface, or to blend with natural gas with the bitumen as condensate. So the natural gas exploration that's happening in British Columbia is very much connected to the tar sands.
How does your group get funding, Sam?
Sorry?
How does your group get funding, like Tanker Free BC? This is your fourth presentation this week. Obviously that costs time and money. How are you able to
Besides my time, it's actually been very inexpensive, and we do a pretty good job. We get some foundation money, and we get some money from regular people like you folks who go to our website and click on donate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My biggest concern with these pipelines is the climate change carbon emissions factor, which nobody seems to be talking about for some reason. We talk a lot about stills, and that's a big problem. But I have a different question. It's got to do with, I guess, the economics of it. We talked about last night how the market, the West Coast markets, are going to be paying $30 to $50 a barrel more for the oil. What's that going to do to I guess, draw up the global price of oil? And will that mean that we're going to be paying more for it here?
Yeah, absolutely. At least that's what Robin Allen has said.
I mean, the Chevron refinery here in Burnaby, they have a contract that's going to expire shortly, and if they have to compete with other refineries around the Pacific Rim, they're probably going to end up paying a higher price, and whether or not that refinery stays open is in jeopardy. The other point about the climate change is a great one. I don't know if you guys know The Onion. It's kind of a joke news site. They had what I thought was a hilarious article a while back that said, the headline was, "Tanker safely docks at destination, terrible environmental disaster," and it's true. I mean, we really have to make the decision right now. We're at a kind of a turning point in our entire civilization. Are we going to start building the infrastructure so we can get off fossil fuels in 50, 60 years, or are we going to ramp up and go even deeper into that hole? So that's the decision you guys are making here in Burnaby.
We don't even have 50 years. I mean, it's like 20.
Well, I mean, the lifespan of big infrastructure projects is around 60 years. So that's why I say that if you build them now, you're stuck with them for that amount of time.
Yeah, my question is on the lifespan of the tar sands oil as well.